Hey, what's going on YouTube? So I'm gonna make my last video on how to love yourself. And again, these videos aren't like very structured and they're not expert advice. It's just things that I've figured out or things that I'm still working at in my life. And I tried to think of 5 ways that you can help love yourself more or just kind of work on appreciating you and getting to know yourself. So far, I've come up with knowing yourself and your values, knowing who you are, forgiving yourself, knowing that you will make mistakes. You're not perfect and that's okay. Standing up for yourself and putting yourself first and knowing your value and knowing that you matter. And my last video was talking about taking action and how doing more than saying will always take you farther, and that practicing, and even though it's hard and you want to be comfortable where you are right now, doing more and practicing over time will always have good results. And the 5th thing that I could come up with, there were so many different things I wanted to talk about, but at the end of the day, I think I wanted to end my 5th video on just simply not giving up. It's really corny and cliche, but literally it ain't over till it's over. And that's how life is. It's very yin and yang, up and down. You know, it's when there's really, really good things happening, then something bad happens, and when something bad happens, something good happens. It's like that balance of life. I know a lot of times I would compare myself to others and think, you know, for example, based on Facebook or Instagram or social networks, or just looking at someone from the outside, you just think, well, they're not going through much and their life seems really happy. But we're no different from each other. What happens in our lives is both good and bad for everybody. You might think one situation is worse than the other. That may be so, but a big factor that plays in it is how they adapt, how they survive, how they deal with it. You might see some people always smiling and always happy. You might see someone that's, struggling a little bit, or you might just see someone who just carries himself a certain way, and that's all based on how they deal with things. There are many ways to cope with life. Some people are more positive. They always try to think positive and they just ignore the bad things. And then some people, when they go through the bad things, they just kind of go through it, they cry it out, they just really submerge themselves in it, and then when they're ready, they move on. Really, there's no right or wrong way, but I think what's important is to not avoid it or ignore it or replace something, because those aren't really confronting anything, and most likely it might reoccur in your life. But however way you face something, how you cope with something and confront something, it's different for everyone, but as long as you confront it and go through it and you keep going, you don't give up, you keep fighting, you're always going to keep going. You're going to keep moving forward. And like I mentioned before, moving forward is the only direction you can go. How I see it, depression and anxiety is linked with being stuck and stagnant. That's how it feels. You get stuck in depression, you get stuck in feeling sad, and it manifests itself everywhere in your life. It's overwhelming, it's overpowering, it's all-consuming, and you get stuck in anxiety, and you get stuck in life in the same situations. And there's so many ways to deal with not being stuck, but the most simple way to put getting out of being stuck is to keep moving forward and to not give up and just to keep going. And it's important not to beat ourselves up when it takes a long time to keep moving, because the one thing I have to say is that when people want to ignore the bad, which is part of yin and yang, it's a part of accepting both sides of things, both sides of life, the good and bad. Because when you ignore one completely, you're off balance. So it's important not to be too hard on yourself. If you need to take time going through something, take your time. Deal with it, feel it, recognize what it is, and keep going. The more you practice this, the more you face things, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be a breeze from now on, but it's gonna be a little bit easier, and you won't feel as overwhelmed and as stuck the next time something happens to you. And it's also important not to beat yourself up about it, is because sometimes it's out of your control. Life has a way of, again, good and bad. Some bad things probably will happen to you. Not to be super pessimistic, it's just realistic. It's having a positive outlook on life is surviving the bad and still keeping your head up. And it may take some time. I know for me it's still taking time, and it's just important not to give up. It's important to not get stuck and wallow and just, get crushed by life. And it's so simple and cliche, I know, but honestly, after all those other topics, this is to me what it comes down to. I'm not keeping track of how long it takes me to do something or how easy it is or if I feel confident about it. I think it's important to recognize, when you're feeling down and it doesn't feel easy or doesn't feel comfortable in doing something, we back away from it. The feeling of confidence isn't automatic. In fact, I feel like acting confident by doing and by facing your fears and facing your depression and anxiety and facing situations that make you feel uncomfortable or insecure or vulnerable, by facing those things, regardless of how it makes us feel, helps us move forward. And one day, it may feel easier. I don't want to say it's going to completely go away. I think it's natural to have fear and anxiety and sadness. That's a part of being a human. But it may be easier to deal with over time when you face it. Okay, a little snippet. One of my favorite shows of all time is Scrubs. And Dr. Kelso tells a patient, nothing worth having in life comes easy. And I really took that to heart. I think sometimes we get caught up in the idea that if something is easy, that's the way it should be. And if it's hard, you just avoid it, you go on to the next, because it's not meant to be. But some things, if it's worth having, you practice, you invest in it. It's like a pearl. We all know pearls and diamonds. They go through a rough period. It's change, it's metamorphosis. It's a beautiful thing. And if you ever want to just get to know yourself better and feel better about yourself and have some sort of confidence in life, you gotta go through a rough patch, but it's not forever. And sometimes maybe we shouldn't look at it as a rough patch. We just see it as progression. Until the end, we keep fighting. So getting to know yourself, forgiving yourself, putting yourself first, taking action, and never giving up are only 5 ways to get to know yourself and to love yourself, and there are so many more. Whoever's watching this and stumbles upon this video that's having a hard time or just wants to get to know themselves more, I'm no expert, but I'm someone who has battled with depression and anxiety, and I'm trying to figure it out myself too. But these are 5 things that hopefully can give you some kind of guidance or can help you out in any way or just give you some hope. And I really appreciate you watching, and good luck out there. Don't stop fighting and never give up.